Brothers and sisters, this is the Words of Wonder YouTube channel. My name is Thomas Holton. Today I want to focus for a few minutes on the talk by Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf at General Conference in April of this year. And his talk was entitled A Higher Joy. He speaks, of course, about the importance of flying high. And he was speaking about the Wright brothers and how they essentially had the great experience of initiating flying for the human race, and how their father, who only flew with them once, was enthralled by the experience and said to them, "Fly higher." And the brothers rejoiced in this. And of course, Elder Uchtdorf explains that this has its parallel in spiritual things, that as men can lift themselves with inspiration and help above the fog of the world temporarily, we can also do the same spiritually. And his invitation is for each and every one of us to experience the higher, holier, deeper joy that the everlasting gospel of Christ has within its power, within its remit to grant to us. And it's a wonderful talk, and I highly encourage you to have a look at it, to read it, to ponder it. And it's Elder Uchtdorf at his finest, teaching these simple principles, but profound, these deep principles, simple, beautiful, precious, but also profoundly supernal, with the capacity to change our lives. He talks about the gospel as being the good news of great joy. This is what he says: the gospel of Jesus Christ is truly the good news of great joy. It is a message of matchless hope, a message of yoke bearing and burden lifting, of light gathering, of heavenly favor, higher understanding, holier covenants, eternal security, and everlasting glory. Joy is the very purpose of God's plan for his children. It's what you were created for, that you might have joy. You were built for this. Just those two paragraphs reveal some marvelous concepts and insights for our instruction and edification. So that the gospel of Jesus Christ is truly the good news of great joy. That, for me, is a profoundly important insight, because in this world of the mist of darkness and obfuscation and the difficulties that we face, it can be very easy to forget that, or to have that obscured from your view. This idea that the gospel of Jesus Christ is good news. It's not bleak news. It's not depressing. It's not fiction. It's truth. But it is the news of great joy. It's the news that blesses us beyond all other news. It's not bad news. It's good news. In fact, it's great news. And he talks about it bringing great joy into our lives. And I love that idea, that it's the true news of great joy. And also this idea that it's a message of matchless hope. We can seek to derive hope from lots of different sources and lots of different experiences and different people in life. But hope, the real hope, the everlasting hope, the profound, supernal hope, comes from the Son of God and from his glorious gospel, his truth. So it's a message of matchless hope, which is to say that there is no other hope from any other source that can compare with it. And my experience tells me that that's true. Having experienced lots of different things in life, my feeling is that Elder Uchtdorf is right about that the message, the pure message, unfiltered, undiluted, unobstructed, the message of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ is the message of matchless hope. Nothing can compare with it in its profound declaration, in its power to bless our lives. So I feel there's a lot of truth encapsulated in that simple phrase. And then he talks about being a message of yoke bearing and burden lifting. That's interesting. I love that. Yoke bearing, which is to bear a challenge, but to bear a yoke, which is to be joined and linked, like the oxen in the symbolic parallel that we always talk about. We're joined with God, the Father and His beloved Son. So we're bearing a yoke. We're connected. We're not alone. And also burden lifting. Yes, we have burdens. Those burdens aren't intended to derail us. They're not intended to weaken us, but to make us better and stronger. So it's burden lifting. So we carry a burden, but we can carry it well. And I think the apostles exemplify that messaging very clearly, very authentically, that they carry great burdens, but they do so with joy. And the burden doesn't have to mean that life is terrible and always hard. Of course, life is going to be hard. Of course, there are challenges. And he does talk about that, about sadness, about remorse, about mental health, about mental health suffering, and all the sort of tribulations, physical sickness and setbacks that we might have in life. And they're all part of the mortal experience, but they don't define the purpose. They are a means to an end. They are temporary in nature. So the gospel of Jesus Christ helps us to lift our burdens. He also talks about light gathering, which is a very interesting phrase, the idea that we're drawing closer to light, to truth. He himself uses a few interesting words about what he's discovered, what he's learned throughout his life. And I think he's a great man, an intelligent man, an educated man, but he's grown into that process of learning. So, and that's the process for all of us. We don't start off this life being completed, being perfected, being everything we will become. We have to grow into it. And so the gospel is about light gathering. It's about acquiring truth, acquiring knowledge, acquiring understanding. And that's a process. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes experience, it takes instruction, it takes setbacks and overcoming hurdles. So we gather that light over time, incrementally. It's not done in a day. And then he talks about of heavenly favor, higher understanding, holier covenants, eternal security, and everlasting glory. So heavenly favor, which is to say that the heavens shine upon us when we try to be good and do good. And God loves it when we are trying to do what's right, when we are trying to be good, when we are trying to bless the lives of others. He loves that, because that's a sign that we are growing and maturing into the true nature of our identity and our destiny. Higher understanding. So we all have understanding as human beings, but the gospel is intended to give us higher understanding. It's intended to lift us all out of our understanding, out of our perspective, out of our domains that are limited, and to think in a higher and holier way. It's also holier covenants. So the covenants we make are holy. They are intended to be sacred. They are intended to be binding and lasting and durable. They are not temporary, which is one of the reasons why he talks about keeping our covenants throughout life, that's really, really important. It's not incidental. It's not trivial. It's critically important. He talks about eternal security, which is a very interesting phrase. It's not a phrase we hear often, but the idea of eternal security, being secure in our eternal place, in our eternal understanding, our knowledge, our destiny, our achievements, that we have a place that we go to in the eternities, and we will be secure in the presence of God. So it's a lovely idea. And also everlasting glory, a glory which befits the eternal moment, which is not just bound up by transitory things, by the pleasures and the joys of a moment, but has a sense of longevity to it, has a sense of light and goodness and radiance and brilliance to it. And then he goes on to say, joy is the very purpose of God's plan for his children, which is a fascinating concept, because if God intends for something to happen, you can be sure he will do everything in his power to bring it about. And of course, we have a role to play, because God doesn't force us to obtain joy, but he does want to help us to obtain that, and he will do everything he can to help us. So it's the purpose, it's the reason. It might seem elusive, it might seem far away, it might seem impossible, but joy is obtainable. It's what you were created for, that you might have joy. You were built for this. So it's what our purpose is. It's our reason for being, to have joy. Of course we're going to have sadness along the way. Of course we're going to have disappointment, sorrow and loss. Of course we're going to have setbacks. Of course we're going to have opposition. That doesn't mean that we can't have joy, both at the same time and later on. And so joy is what we're built for. It's what we're made for. It's what we long for. We want to be happy. We want to be blessed. And if we do want those things, God will make it possible. And he has made it possible. He goes on to talk about some really interesting principles and concepts, such as serving others and loving others and trying to lift the burdens of others. He talks about the importance of making and keeping covenants, of doing daily things, to focus on the daily joy of the moment, not always looking for the spectacular, but looking for those simple everyday moments which can bless our lives, and the importance of being seeking for that holy life, that higher joy, that as we seek it, we find it. This is a really beautiful talk. It's one I encourage you to study and ponder and reflect and imbibe into your life to make it part of your living. I know that the gospel of Jesus Christ is a gospel of joy. I know it's a gospel of meaning. It's a gospel of depth. It's a gospel of power and truth and love. It's all the things we declare it to be. And that's not just in theory, but in actuality. My experience tells me that these things Elder Uchtdorf has spoken about and promised, they are true, they are real, and that joy is within our grasp if we look to God, our Father and his beloved Son. We look to them daily and we draw close to them, seek them out, serve them, keep their law. And keeping their law can be a joyful thing. It can be a glorious, freedom-loving thing. It can be an expansive thing. We can fly high spiritually. We can be more than what we currently are, and we can learn more and feel more and love more and have more peace and more joy than we currently do. It's my testimony that Elder Uchtdorf is an apostle of Christ, and he invites us to experience the joy of Christ. I believe that Christ is joyful. I know he is joyful. He is happy because he seeks to be righteous. He is righteous, and righteousness is happiness. Goodness is joy. Love, truth, beauty, honor, honesty, faithfulness. These are the things that bring joy into our lives. The service of others, the love of others, honesty and integrity. I bear testimony of the higher, holier joy that is available to us through our Father and through the Lord Jesus Christ. And I invite all and encourage all to come unto Christ, who is the author and the finisher of our faith. He will make it so as we trust in him and follow him with all our hearts. And I'm grateful for these marvelous, beautiful, heavenly truths.